There's a kind of silence that doesn't echo, doesn't scream, but still, it aches. A silence that lingers between two souls who once touched, once looked at each other like the world made sense, and now, nothing. He misses you. You can feel it. It's in the way your heart tugs when you think of him. It's in the nights when your body still expects a message that never arrives. And yet, he doesn't reach out. He doesn't say a word. And that absence? It begins to sound louder than love itself. You find yourself questioning your worth in the space between his emotions and his actions, as if your value had become a hostage of his silence. You try to rationalize. If he truly missed me, wouldn't he have called? Wouldn't he have fought for me? But deep down, what hurts isn't just the lack of contact. What hurts is the story your heart starts telling in that silence. That maybe you weren't enough. That maybe something's wrong with you. That maybe love has left and won't come back. Louise Hay once said, "You have been criticizing yourself for years, and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens." And maybe that's where the real wound lives, not in his absence, but in the mirror you hold up to yourself when he doesn't show up. It's not his silence that destroys you. It's the silence you create inside, replacing your voice with the noise of doubt, a noise that whispers, "Why am I never the one chosen? Why does he miss me but not enough to act?" Sometimes, the woman who waits isn't just longing for a message. She's longing to feel seen again, to feel wanted, needed, remembered. There's a little girl inside her who learned early on that love equals attention, and that being forgotten equals being unworthy. So she watches the screen. She keeps the volume up. She checks, double checks, pretends she's not waiting, but she is. Marianne Williamson reminds us, love is what we were born with. Fear is what we learned here. And maybe his silence isn't about you. Maybe it's about his own fear. Fear of closeness, fear of truth, fear of you. Because to miss you means to feel. And feeling can be terrifying when a man hasn't yet faced his own heart. He may miss you deeply, and still not know how to bridge the space between wanting and acting. But the real question isn't what's going on with him. The real question is, what's going on inside you while you wait? What are you making this silence mean about your own worth? What parts of yourself are you abandoning, just to hold on to the idea that he might still come back? This video isn't about making him text you. It's not about decoding his silence like a puzzle. It's about something far more sacred, understanding the emotional truth behind his absence, and the even deeper truth that's awakening within you as you stand in the space he refuses to fill. Let's go there. Let's walk through the silence together. Because you are not broken. You're just remembering who you truly are. There are silences that scream louder than any goodbye. Silences that seem to say everything he's too afraid to confess. You know he feels something. It's in the way your connection lingers like a perfume that hasn't yet faded. And yet, he stays away. No message. No explanation. Just that haunting quiet that wraps around your chest like a question with no answer. You feel it in your body, before your mind tries to explain it. The subtle anxiety. The ache in your heart when you wake up hoping for his name on the screen and find only empty space. And that absence doesn't feel neutral. It feels personal. It feels like rejection. Because somewhere inside, a part of you still believes that if you mattered, he would speak. He would come. He would break the silence. But here's the truth no one tells you. The ache you feel is not just about missing him. It's about what his silence awakens inside you. That old wound. The one that says, if I'm not remembered, I must not be worthy. The belief that love means being constantly affirmed, contacted, chased. The fear that if someone forgets you, you stop existing. His silence isn't just the absence of words. It becomes the presence of every past abandonment you've lived. Every time you felt invisible, unchosen, not enough. And in that silence, the story repeats. Not because it's true, but because the wound still believes it is. But what if the silence isn't speaking about your worth? What if it's speaking about his own fear, his confusion, his inability to hold what he feels? And what if the ache you feel is not a sign to wait, but a sign to wake up? Because silence can hurt, but it can also reveal. It reveals the places in you that still crave to be chosen to feel complete. It shows the parts of you that still outsource your value to someone else's actions. And in doing so, it gives you the most painful and most powerful invitation of all, the chance to choose yourself. There's a difficult truth that many hearts resist. Just because someone misses you doesn't mean they're capable of loving you. He may think of you. He may long for the softness of your presence, the comfort of your voice, the way you made him feel seen. But still, he doesn't come. And that hurts, because you feel the energy between you isn't over, but he keeps his distance. Missing is a feeling, loving is a capacity, and intimacy is a responsibility. Some men miss deeply but collapse under the weight of closeness. They want to feel, but not to stay. They want warmth, but fear the vulnerability it requires. So they linger in silence, suspended between their desire and their incapacity. Not because you're too much, but because they don't know how to hold even their own hearts. For a woman who loves con intensidade, this is confusing. It's natural to assume that if someone misses you, they'll come back. They'll make it known. But not every man who misses knows how to reach. Not every man who remembers knows how to repair. And that gap, between what they feel and what they do, becomes the space where your heart keeps waiting. You might wonder, if he thinks of me, why doesn't he act? But that question can become a trap if it leads you to wait longer than your soul can afford. Because sometimes, what you're waiting for isn't love. It's proof that you mattered. And the pain isn't just about his absence. It's about what his silence is awakening in your self-worth. This is where emotional maturity begins, not in getting answers from him, but in learning to live with the questions and still choose peace. Because your healing doesn't depend on whether he's ready. It begins the moment you stop asking if his silence means he doesn't care, and start asking why you still tie your value to his voice. There's a sentence that quietly settles in your mind after days of silence. If he really missed me, he would talk to me. It sounds logical. It sounds fair. But beneath that thought lives a tender, trembling hope. The hope that someone will break the silence not just to return, but to rescue you from it. Because when you've been left too many times before, you begin to believe that love must come back to prove it was ever real. But that thought, that inner dialogue, often becomes a blade turned inward. Each time he stays silent, the mind repeats, he doesn't care. You're not worth the effort. It's happening again. And with every repetition, the pain deepens. Not because it's true, but because the voice inside has been echoing since long before this man disappeared. This is not just about him. This is about what silence has always meant to you. Maybe it meant punishment growing up. Maybe it meant rejection. Maybe it meant being invisible, even when you were trying your hardest to be seen. So now, when a man pulls away, that wound reopens. And the little girl inside doesn't just feel abandoned, she feels erased. But here's the sacred truth. You are not that child anymore. You are a woman with a voice, a woman who can stay with herself even when others cannot, a woman who can learn to hold her own heart instead of waiting for someone else to pick it up off the floor. The pain you feel is not irrational, it is ancient. It comes from the hope that someone will finally stay. But healing begins when you realize that staying present with yourself, is the most powerful act of love you can offer. To not abandon yourself in the silence, to not believe that his absence must mean your inadequacy, because sometimes the story you tell yourself hurts more than the one you're living. If Louise Hay were sitting across from you right now, looking into your tired, searching eyes, she wouldn't ask about him. She wouldn't ask why he's silent, or whether he still thinks of you. She would ask about you, about how long you've been holding your breath, about how long you've been waiting to feel chosen, about the moments you've whispered to yourself, maybe I'm just not enough. She would remind you of something that sounds simple, but touches a place so deep, it aches. I am willing to release the need to be unworthy, not just to believe you're worthy, but to release the need to feel unworthy. Because sometimes, without realizing it, we cling to pain we've outgrown, simply because it's familiar. The woman who waits is often not waiting for him. She's waiting for a version of herself that never learned how to stop waiting. She's waiting for the day she finally feels seen, not by him, but by the reflection in her own eyes. And Louise would see that. She'd see the girl inside you who was taught that love comes when you behave, when you're beautiful, when you're wanted. And she'd gently tell her, love is already here, inside you, waiting for you to arrive. His silence is not about your worth. His confusion is not your cross to carry. When a man disappears into himself, it is not your job to rescue him, especially if doing so means abandoning yourself once again. Louise would say this, not to harden you, but to free you, to remind you that your life doesn't pause for someone else's uncertainty, because the moment you stop tying your value to his presence is the moment you begin to come home to yourself. There's a sacred moment in a woman's life when she stops checking the phone, not because she's given up, but because she's returned to herself, to her breath, to her rhythm, to her center, and in that moment, something begins to shift. The silence that used to define her worth no longer has that power. It's not instant. It doesn't happen just because you say you're done. It happens in the quiet acts of reclaiming your life, in choosing to read the book, take the walk, light the candle, even though he hasn't called. It happens when your day is no longer organized around a possible message, when your body exhales without fear of being forgotten again. That's when you know your worth has detached from his return, and it's not about pretending you don't care. You do. You're human. You loved. You felt. You hoped. But now, your hope is no longer tethered to someone else's readiness. You're not waiting to be picked. You're choosing yourself, again and again. That's the essence of emotional freedom. When you stop asking if he'll come back and start living as if you've already come home, to your voice, to your needs, to your truth. And you'll notice, the absence doesn't sting the same way anymore. It may still visit, but it doesn't stay, because you're no longer empty in his silence. You are full in your own presence. Louise Hay would smile gently and say, "I now discover how wonderful I am. I choose to love and enjoy myself." And you will feel it, not as a mantra, but as a memory returning. A memory of who you were before waiting became a habit. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from running, but from standing still, waiting for a sound that never comes, for a message that keeps promising itself in your mind, maybe tomorrow. That hope, though dressed in softness, becomes a trap. It holds your life hostage to a future that may never arrive. You start organizing your emotions around the possibility of him. You pause plans. You postpone peace. You keep one part of your heart on hold, just in case he remembers. Just in case he feels enough. Just in case tomorrow becomes the day he finally chooses you out loud. But tomorrow keeps slipping through your fingers. And the truth is, when your emotional world orbits around maybe, it never lands. You become suspended between what you deserve and what you've settled for, between your longing and his indecision, between the love you've given and the silence you've received. This kind of waiting isn't passive. It costs. It costs your joy. It costs your confidence. It costs your ability to be fully present with the life that's here, now. Because each day you delay your wholeness for someone else's confusion is a day you abandon the woman you're becoming. It's not about giving up. It's about waking up. Waking up to the truth that love should not require you to freeze your soul. That longing is sacred, but not when it becomes a leash. And that sometimes, the only thing more painful than his silence is your own voice telling you to wait a little longer. She used to measure her worth in silences. Each day without a message felt like a quiet confirmation of something she feared deep down, that maybe love always leaves, that maybe she was easy to forget. His absence didn't just echo, it carved itself into her thoughts. She replayed moments, reread conversations, looked for signs, and still, nothing came. She knew he missed her. She could feel it in the energy, in the dreams, in the sudden waves of memory that arrived uninvited. But that knowing wasn't enough, because he didn't act. And each day that passed without a word, she began to disappear a little more from herself. She stopped singing in the shower. She stopped dressing up for her own joy. She stopped laughing at the small things that once made life feel like poetry. Until one morning, not a dramatic one, just an ordinary, quiet morning, something in her shifted. She looked in the mirror and realized that waiting had taken more from her than his silence ever could. And it wasn't rage that filled her. It wasn't bitterness. It was grief. Grief for the parts of herself she had put on hold, while hoping someone else would come back and choose her. That day, she didn't stop loving him, but she stopped waiting for him. And in doing so, she began to return to herself, to the rituals that made her feel alive, to the tenderness of her own presence, to the stillness that no longer felt like a punishment, but a pause. She remembered that love doesn't always end when someone walks away. Sometimes it ends when you realize you've been the one leaving yourself behind. He may still miss her, but she no longer lives in that space. She no longer begs the universe for a sign. She has become the sign. She has become the presence that once was missing. In her own life, there's a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when longing turns into listening, when instead of straining your soul to hear from him, you begin to hear from yourself. It doesn't happen overnight. At first you still check your phone. You still imagine what you would say if he came back. But little by little, the space he left begins to speak, not with his voice, but with your own. You begin to notice what you truly need, not just from him, but from life, from love, from yourself. The silence that once screamed starts to soften. It becomes a mirror that reflects the truth you didn't want to admit, that love is not only about being wanted, it's about being met, fully, honestly, consistently. And maybe, just maybe, he can't meet you there, not because you're too much, but because he's not yet enough for the kind of love you're ready to live. And that's when everything shifts. You stop waiting to hear, "I miss you," because you already know. But now, you also know that missing is not the same as showing up. Longing is not the same as choosing. And you are no longer willing to build your heart around someone else's, maybe. Now, you listen differently. You listen to your intuition, the one that always knew. You listen to your breath. You listen to the way your body relaxes when you no longer abandon yourself. You listen to the quiet power of presence. And in that listening, something sacred happens. You begin to trust your own timing more than his return. You begin to understand that healing doesn't mean forgetting him. It means remembering yourself. There comes a time when a woman realizes that silence is not the enemy. It's the invitation. An invitation to return, to sit with herself, to no longer wait for someone to say, "You matter." Because now, she knows. She knows not because he called, but because she stopped abandoning herself to be chosen, because she stopped tying her identity to his voice. Louise Hay once offered a phrase that now lands deeper than ever. "I now discover how wonderful I am. I choose to love and enjoy myself." And maybe that's the real shift. Not in him coming back, but in you coming alive. In choosing to see the beauty that was never dependent on his recognition. In finding joy not in being found, but in being full. His silence? It says more about his emotional landscape than your value. It reflects confusion, avoidance, fear, but it no longer reflects you. Because now, you're not shaped by absence. You are shaped by presence. Your own. Your sacred, unwavering presence. Marianne Williamson reminds us, we are not held back by the love we didn't receive, but by the love we are not giving ourselves. And you begin to realize, the love you were waiting for was always yours to give, not to him, but to the woman in the mirror who waited so long to be seen. So you stop looking at the door, you stop waiting for the knock, and instead, you turn on the light, not to signal to him, but to remind yourself, you are home, you are enough. You are no longer the woman who waits for someone to choose her. You are the woman who chooses herself, fully, deeply, daily. And now, as this chapter closes, feel that presence within you. Let it expand. Let it carry you. You don't have to wait to be seen. You already are. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us. This space is yours, a place where silence transforms into strength and waiting becomes awakening. And if you're ready to keep walking this path of healing and emotional clarity, click on the next video on your screen, because the journey doesn't end here. You're just getting started.